What if the Confederacy had won the American Civil War? It's a question that fascinates historians, writers, and history buffs alike, because the outcome of that brutal four-year conflict shaped the United States and the world as we know it. But what if things had gone differently? What if the Southern states had broken away, establishing their own independent nation? Would slavery have persisted? Would the United States have fractured permanently? How would the world have responded? And most importantly, how would this alternate timeline have affected everyday people, politics, and the course of history? In this video, we'll explore those questions, with careful attention to historical facts, key moments in the war, and realistic consequences. No wild exaggerations, just grounded speculation based on what we know. So, let's dive in and imagine, what if the Confederacy had won? What was the Confederacy's goal in the Civil War? At its core, the Confederacy fought to preserve its independence and, crucially, the institution of slavery. Southern states seceded from the Union primarily over the right to maintain slavery, which was deeply tied to their economy and social order. But did all Southerners support slavery? And how unified was the Confederacy really? While the Confederate leadership was clear on preserving slavery, not every Southerner was a slaveholder or staunch supporter. The Confederacy's population included poor white farmers and non-slaveholders who nonetheless fought for states' rights, local autonomy, and defense of their homeland. Still, slavery remained central to the Confederate Constitution and war effort. How did the war start, and what were the turning points? The war began in April 1861 with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The Union, under President Abraham Lincoln, sought to preserve the nation and end secession. Key battles shaped the conflict's course. The First Battle of Bull Run shocked the North with a Confederate victory, signaling a long war ahead. Antietam became the bloodiest single day in American history. Gettysburg in 1863 marked the turning point when Union forces halted General Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North. But what if Lee had won at Gettysburg? What if the South had secured a decisive victory here? Many historians argue Gettysburg was the Confederacy's best chance to force Union negotiations or even recognition from European powers like Britain and France. Could the Confederacy have won the war? The South faced massive challenges: fewer factories, less rail infrastructure, and a smaller population. The North's industrial and manpower advantages were overwhelming. Yet the Confederacy had advantages in military leadership. Generals like Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson were brilliant tacticians. The South also fought defensively on familiar terrain with high morale and motivation. The question is, could the Confederacy have turned those advantages into victory? What if the Confederacy won at Gettysburg? If Lee had succeeded at Gettysburg, the Union might have faced political pressure to negotiate peace. European powers, who were watching closely, might have recognized the Confederacy diplomatically or even provided aid. That recognition could have shifted the war dramatically. What role did international recognition play? Britain and France had complex relationships with both sides. The South hoped for British support, due to their reliance on Southern cotton for their textile mills. But Britain hesitated, partly due to anti-slavery sentiment among its population and the Union's naval blockade limiting Confederate exports. Had the Confederacy won key battles and proved viable, Britain and France might have intervened, or at least recognized Confederate independence, breaking the Union blockade. So what would a Confederate victory look like? Let's say the Confederacy wins independence, either by outright military victory or through negotiated settlement. This new Confederacy would be a separate nation, maintaining slavery, at least initially, with its capital in Richmond, Virginia. The United States would be divided into two or more countries, radically altering the political landscape. Would slavery have continued in the Confederacy? Most likely, yes, at least for years or decades. The Confederacy's founding documents explicitly protected slavery, and the Southern economy depended heavily on enslaved labor for cotton, tobacco, and other crops. But what about international pressure or internal dissent? While Britain and France had abolished slavery decades earlier, they prioritized economics and realpolitik. If the Confederacy gained diplomatic recognition, economic pressures could mount, but might not immediately end slavery. Additionally, abolitionist sentiment was weaker in the South, and enslaved people would likely continue resisting in various ways. What would happen to the United States? The Union, now without the Southern states, would become smaller and perhaps less politically divided in the short term. Abraham Lincoln might never have issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which reframed the war around ending slavery. The loss of the South would profoundly affect the Northern economy, politics, and national identity. Would the U.S. attempt to regain the South by force in the future? Would the division lead to lasting hostility? History suggests border tensions would persist, and future conflicts might arise over territory or trade. How would Native American nations be affected? The Civil War overlapped with conflicts involving Native American tribes, many of whom sided with either the Union or Confederacy, based on promises or self-interest. A divided America might lead to shifting alliances, as both countries sought Native allies and land. The Confederacy might push further west to secure territory, leading to more conflicts with Native nations. Would Reconstruction have happened? In our timeline, Reconstruction aimed to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into society. But with the South independent, Reconstruction would be impossible under the same terms. Instead, the Confederacy might maintain a rigid racial caste system with no federal intervention. The U.S. might focus on its own rebuilding without Southern states, potentially accelerating industrialization and westward expansion. What about economic consequences? The South's economy relied heavily on agriculture and slave labor, while the North industrialized rapidly. Without the South, the U.S. might industrialize even faster. The Confederacy would face challenges modernizing its economy while maintaining slavery. International trade might suffer due to blockades or tariffs. Could the Confederacy have abolished slavery? Eventually, some historians argue slavery was on a path to decline due to economic changes, but entrenched social systems and political interests made abolition unlikely in the short term. Over decades, international pressure and internal movements might force change, but this remains speculative. How would the civil rights movement be affected? Without the Union victory, the abolition of slavery would be delayed or incomplete. Civil rights progress in the South would lag or be stifled. The U.S. might see different social movements emerge focused on uniting the country or pressuring the Confederacy. What would the global impact be? A divided America would affect world politics. European powers might exploit divisions for their interests. The U.S. might be weaker on the world stage, with reduced influence. The Confederacy could ally with certain powers to secure recognition, impacting global alliances. Would there be future wars between the Confederacy and the U.S.? Possibly. Border disputes, trade conflicts, or attempts at reunification could spark future wars. The bitterness of the Civil War might persist for generations. How would slavery's legacy influence modern society? Slavery's prolonged existence would deeply shape Southern culture and society. Racial segregation and inequality could persist longer, affecting generations. The legacy of division might make national reconciliation more difficult. What lessons can we learn from this alternate history? This scenario highlights the importance of choices made during the Civil War. It reminds us how fragile unity can be and how deeply social systems like slavery affect a nation's future. Understanding this what-if helps appreciate the sacrifices and struggles that shaped modern America. So, what if the Confederacy had won? A divided America, prolonged slavery, ongoing conflict, and a radically altered world. While some hoped the war might be short or bloodless, the reality was complex and brutal, and a Confederate victory would not have solved those problems, but changed them profoundly. History is shaped by what did happen, but imagining what could have been teaches us the stakes of those moments. If you found this exploration interesting, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What other alternate history scenarios do you want to explore? Thanks for watching.